Imagine a community project where decisions about funding are made by a select few, often shrouded in mystery. Picture a group of individuals, perhaps well-meaning, but ultimately disconnected from the everyday realities of the community. They gather in closed meetings, deliberating how to allocate resources for public services. This process breeds inefficiencies and creates a breeding ground for mistrust. What if instead, every community member had a voice in these decisions? What if the allocation of funds was a transparent collective process? In traditional treasury management, we often see centralized control over finances, which can lead to a disconnect between those making decisions and those affected by them. This concentration of power not only limits input from diverse community perspectives, but also amplifies the risk of misallocation and waste. When a small group holds the reins, critical insights from the broader community are often overlooked, leading to funding decisions that may not align with the actual needs of the people. Moreover, this lack of transparency can breed distrust among community members. They may feel that decisions are made behind closed doors, without accountability or scrutiny. This atmosphere of uncertainty can diminish public engagement and participation, creating a cycle where funding decisions become increasingly removed from the community's reality. Imagine if we flipped this model on its head. Suppose we embraced a community-driven approach to treasury management, where funding decisions are made collectively, with input from all stakeholders. What would happen if funding allocations were guided by the community's direct needs and preferences, rather than a narrow viewpoint? The strange consequence is that by democratizing financial decision-making, we could foster a sense of ownership and responsibility among community members. Individuals would feel empowered, knowing their voices matter in shaping the resources that impact their lives. Yet this raises important questions. How do we ensure that every voice is heard equally? What mechanisms can we put in place to avoid the pitfalls of inefficient decision-making that can arise from too many conflicting opinions? As we ponder these questions, we must consider the balance between decentralization and effective governance. The challenge lies not just in opening the treasury to the community, but in creating a framework that ensures accountability and efficacy in the decision-making process. In this exploration of treasury management, we begin to see the potential for a transformative shift towards a system that is both transparent and responsive. What if the future of public spending could truly reflect the will and needs of the people it serves? Imagine a bustling community meeting where residents gather not just to voice their concerns, but to actively participate in shaping their environment. What if the funds for local projects, like a new playground or community garden, could be allocated through a real-time, transparent process that everyone could see? This is where smart contract treasuries come into play. These innovative systems allow communities to program their financial resources with specific rules and parameters, ensuring that every dollar spent aligns with the collective will of the people. Picture this. A community decides to allocate funds for a new park. Instead of a few individuals making decisions behind closed doors, every resident has a vote, and smart contracts enforce the outcome, automatically managing the allocation of funds based on the community's preferences. Each decision is recorded and traceable, creating a transparent history of expenditures that anyone can verify. This traceability is crucial. It builds public trust as residents can see exactly where their money is going and how it is being used. The smart contract ensures that spending limits are enforced and that the funds are only dispersed once the required votes are cast, eliminating the potential for misuse or misallocation. What happens if the community decides to change its mind halfway through the project? The beauty of smart contracts lies in their adaptability. They can be programmed to allow for amendments, ensuring that the project evolves based on ongoing community feedback while maintaining accountability. Imagine the conversations that would unfold in this setting, neighbors discussing their priorities, debating the merits of different projects, and feeling empowered to influence the outcome of their shared resources. The strange consequence here is that the very act of funding becomes a community-building exercise, fostering a sense of ownership and collaboration that traditional models often lack. Yet we must also consider potential challenges. Who gets to propose projects? What happens if there are conflicting interests within the community? The governance of such a decentralized system requires careful consideration to ensure that it remains inclusive and representative. There is a risk that those with louder voices might dominate discussions, sidelining more vulnerable members of the community. However, by embedding safeguards into the smart contract, like minimum participation thresholds or weighted voting based on community input, these issues can be mitigated. Thus, we find ourselves at a crossroads. Can we truly harness the power of technology to create a more participatory and equitable process for public spending? As we delve deeper into this thought experiment, we must ask ourselves, what if these programmable treasuries not only redefine how we allocate funds, but also reshape our very relationships with one another as community members? What if the future of public spending could indeed reflect the diversity of voices that comprise our communities, fostering a culture of transparency, accountability, and collaboration? Imagine walking through your community park on a sunny afternoon, where children laugh as they play and families gather for picnics. Now, consider how that park came to be. Traditionally, funding for such projects often relies on bureaucratic processes where decisions are made behind closed doors, sometimes alienating the very people it impacts. But what if we could reimagine this process with a smart contract treasury? With programmable spending, every decision about funding could be transparent, ensuring that every dollar spent is traceable and accountable. This is not just a theoretical exercise. It's a practical alternative that could empower communities like yours. The strange consequence is that when expenditures are transparent, trust in public institutions can flourish. You might wonder, how could this work in practice? Picture a scenario where each community member can propose projects, vote on them, and see the funds allocated in real time. No more waiting for bureaucrats to decide. The community becomes the architect of its own resources. This direct involvement means that funding decisions would reflect the actual needs and priorities of the residents, fostering a sense of ownership and responsibility. Imagine a local business being funded to provide job training, or a neighborhood garden project being supported through a collective vote. The beauty of programmable spending lies in its ability to elevate community voices, ensuring that decisions are made not by a select few, but by the many. This shift could transform how we think about public goods. It's not just about transparency, it's about empowerment. Communities would no longer be passive recipients of funds, but active participants in shaping their environments. The implications are profound. With every transaction recorded on a blockchain, the community can hold its leaders accountable. If a project fails to deliver, everyone can see where the funds went and why it didn't succeed. It's a system that demands responsibility from all involved, from the community members to the fund administrators. However, this new model does come with challenges. How do we ensure that everyone participates equally? What safeguards are needed to prevent misuse of the system? These are crucial questions that we must consider as we explore the implementation of smart contract treasuries. Yet the potential benefits, greater trust, empowerment, and accountability, are compelling reasons to pursue this path. What if your community could truly take charge of its destiny, shaping its funding landscape in a way that reflects its values and priorities? The answers lie in rethinking how we approach public spending, moving toward a future where every dollar is not just spent, but spent wisely, transparently, and with purpose. Imagine a bustling community center, where residents gather not just to exchange pleasantries but to engage in meaningful discussions about their shared future. What if the funds for revitalizing that neglected playground or establishing a community library could be allocated through a transparent, democratic process visible to every resident? This is not merely a fantasy. It's a reality that some organizations and local governments are beginning to embrace through smart contract treasuries. In this segment, let's explore concrete examples from diverse sectors that illustrate how programmable treasuries are reshaping the landscape of public funding. Take the case of a nonprofit dedicated to environmental conservation. They implemented a smart contract treasury to manage donations for community-led cleanup projects. Each donor can specify how their contributions will be used and vote on upcoming projects through the treasury's interface. This not only empowers the community, but also ensures that funds are allocated according to the collective priorities of the donors. Imagine the trust that builds when every dollar spent is traceable, every decision made in the open, and every participant aware of how their contributions are impacting the environment they cherish. Now, let's consider a local government in a mid-sized city that has adopted a similar approach. They launched a pilot program using a smart contract treasury to fund neighborhood improvement initiatives. Residents can propose projects, vote on which ones to fund, and see real-time updates on how funds are being spent. The strange consequence is that this has not only enhanced community engagement, but also significantly reduced the bureaucratic delays that often plague traditional funding processes. Residents feel a sense of ownership over their contributions, knowing that their voices directly shape the projects that affect them. What if we could extend this model even further? Suppose a community organization wants to address local health disparities. By utilizing a smart contract treasury, they could create a fund specifically for health initiatives. Community members could propose programs such as wellness workshops or health screenings, and vote on which initiatives to prioritize. The treasury would automatically execute the funding based on the community's collective decisions. This creates a responsive funding mechanism that adapts to the community's evolving needs, ensuring that resources are directed where they are most impactful. These examples showcase the potential of smart contract treasuries to facilitate not just funding, but a shift in how communities engage with their resources. However, we must also consider the hurdles that come with this innovative approach. The technology must be accessible and understandable to all community members. Additionally, there's the question of governance. How do we ensure that the system remains fair and that all voices are heard? It's a delicate balance between decentralization, where power is spread among many, and the need for effective decision-making. In these scenarios, we see the transformative potential of smart contract treasuries, but we also encounter skepticism about their feasibility. Can these systems truly work on a larger scale? What safeguards need to be put in place to prevent misuse or mismanagement? As we explore these questions, we must ask ourselves, what changes if we take the premise of programmable treasuries seriously? Who truly benefits, and who might feel left behind? Can this model withstand the complexities of diverse communities with varying needs? As we transition to the next segment, let's hold these questions in mind. The promise of smart contract treasuries is not just in their technology, but in their ability to empower communities, reshape funding dynamics, and foster accountability. But the path to realizing that promise is fraught with challenges, and it is through grappling with these complexities that we can envision a more equitable future in public spending. Imagine a community where funding decisions are made by a chorus of voices, each contributing to the shared vision of their neighborhood. Now, suppose this collective enthusiasm is channeled into a smart contract treasury, which promises transparency and accountability. At first glance, it sounds like an ideal solution. Every dollar is tracked, every decision is recorded, and the community feels empowered. But what could go wrong if community funding decisions were made without proper oversight? The strange consequence is that while the technology holds immense potential, the very decentralization that promises to democratize decision-making can also lead to governance pitfalls. In this exploration, we must confront the challenges that arise when we trade traditional structures for a more fluid model of governance. Consider the case of a community project aimed at revitalizing a local park through a smart contract treasury. The community comes together, excitedly proposing various improvements, from new playground equipment to community gardens. Each proposal receives votes, and funding is allocated accordingly. However, without a robust mechanism to prevent manipulation or ensure equitable representation, what starts as a collaborative effort can quickly devolve into a popularity contest. Imagine if a vocal minority, perhaps those with more social media savvy, dominate the discussions, skewing priorities away from what truly benefits the community as a whole. Would the funds end up serving a select few rather than the broader population? This concern underscores the need for safeguards to ensure effective decision-making. Decentralization can empower, but it can also create a vacuum of responsibility. In a traditional governance structure, the accountability is often clearer. There are officials who can be held responsible for their decisions. In a decentralized system, however, who bears the weight of misallocation? If a community treasury funds a project that fails to deliver, how does the community hold anyone accountable? One potential solution is the implementation of structured voting systems that require broader consensus or multi-tiered decision-making processes. For instance, what if funding allocations required not just a simple majority but a supermajority, ensuring that a wider range of voices are heard? However, this can complicate the process and slow down decision-making, which may frustrate community members eager to see immediate results. The balance between efficiency and inclusivity becomes a tightrope walk. Moreover, the risk of fragmentation looms large. As community members establish their own priorities, factions may emerge, each advocating for their interests. This fragmentation can create a scenario where the treasury becomes a battleground instead of a collaborative space. Communities could end up investing in competing projects rather than uniting around a common goal. In essence, while the allure of decentralization is strong, the reality is that it can lead to chaos if not carefully managed. As we ponder these scenarios, it's crucial to remember that the technology itself is not inherently flawed. Rather, the systems of governance we overlay onto it can make or break its efficacy. The promise of smart contract treasuries rests on our ability to design governance frameworks that encourage participation while also instilling a sense of responsibility. What if we could create a hybrid model, combining the best of decentralized decision-making with the accountability structures of traditional governance? So, as we look toward the future of public spending, we must ask ourselves, how can we harness the power of smart contracts while ensuring that our communities remain cohesive, inclusive, and accountable? The answers may lie in the very challenges we face, pushing us to innovate not just in technology, but in governance itself. What if every community had the power to shape its own funding landscape, directly reflecting the will of its people? Imagine a town meeting buzzing with energy and enthusiasm, where residents of all ages gather not just to voice concerns, but to actively participate in shaping their future. Instead of waiting for bureaucratic processes to unfold, what if they could vote on projects and priorities in real time, with every decision backed by a smart contract treasury? This is the heart of envisioning a new paradigm for public spending, a shift toward a future where funding is not just a line item on a budget, but a dynamic conversation among community members. In this world, the funding of public goods like parks, libraries, and community centers aligns perfectly with the express needs and desires of the residents who use them. It's a scenario that asks us to consider the implications of programmable treasuries, where transparency and accountability are woven into the fabric of every transaction. This would not be merely a technological upgrade. It could redefine the very relationship between governance and the governed. Imagine then a scenario where community members propose initiatives, perhaps a local art project or a neighborhood cleanup, and through a secure, transparent voting process, the community allocates funds directly through smart contracts. These contracts could enforce spending limits, ensuring that every dollar is accounted for and every project is completed as promised. The strange consequence is a governance model that is not just responsive, but is also reflective of the community's evolving identity. However, this empowerment comes with its own set of challenges. As we hand over the reins of funding decisions to the community, we must grapple with questions of inclusivity and representation. Who gets to decide what projects are prioritized? What safeguards can we put in place to prevent the loudest voices from drowning out the quieter ones? These are not trivial concerns, as the risk of potential inequities must be addressed if we are to foster a truly democratic funding landscape. Furthermore, the implications extend beyond mere dollars and cents. A community-driven treasury could cultivate a deeper sense of ownership and responsibility among residents. When people see their ideas come to fruition, they are more likely to engage, volunteer, and invest their time and energy into their community. This potential for increased civic engagement could lead to a more vibrant, interconnected society where public goods are not just funded but cherished. As we explore this vision, it's essential to ask ourselves, what would happen if we fully embrace this model? The answers may reveal not only the benefits of accountability and transparency, but also the intricate web of human relationships that funds can foster. In this envisioned world, every dollar spent is a testament to community collaboration, a reflection of shared values, and a step towards a more engaged citizenry. This is the future we can build, one where programmable treasuries transform not just how we allocate resources, but how we connect with one another and envision our collective destiny.